So let's get everybody up to speed. Roll it.
On the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, Americans and American symbols in 2 Arab countries tonight are under attack by radical Islamist forces, and someone at the American consulate in Benghazi is dead. Unclear if that
We were not aware of any actionable intelligence indicating that an attack on the U.S. mission in Benghazi was planned or imminent. This is not a case of protests directed at the United States.
It began spontaneously.
We've seen rage and violence directed at American embassies.
Sparked by this hateful video.
Over an awful internet video that we had nothing to do with.
Protests that arose because of the outrage over the video.
This video is disgusting.
Disgusting and reprehensible.
Where there is an offensive video or cartoon.
There was a hateful video.
This is in response to a video that is offensive.
You don't really believe that?
Of course, absolutely I believe that, because in fact it's the case.
This came out when the embassy of Benghazi was attacked, and they went back to Bush's attacks, the attacks that occurred in embassies under President Bush, and which I think, hey, we want to recognize those, but contextually they have nothing to do with each other, considering the events that led up, as well as the security requests, as well as 4 Americans, including our ambassador, first time in 30 years, that was killed. So they're trying to mix this in, but it's always about the distraction. It's always about that, rather than just focusing in on the topic at hand and trying to get the truth. And I say trying because we're still learning what the truth is. There's a great deal of conjecture based on evidence that we have that's revealed to us later, but we were lied to about before. And that's the problem. One of the many. The other problem is the attitude. Nancy Pelosi, after General Laval testified, who was head of African Command stationed in Germany, you heard the emotional testimony. She was asked about it, and here's the former House Speaker's response. Roll it.
To talk about that the video essentially caused the attack on the embassy. And can I get your thoughts on that?
I haven't seen that, but what I will say is, again, diversion, subterfuge. Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. Why aren't we talking about something else? Whatever was in that, what I know of what I've read in the press about the that those emails were very consistent with what was put out there before. I don't think there's anything new there. Yes, sir.
Speechless. I wrote on the Facebook page, rotten to the core. Normally, I'm not that strong in my assessment because I want to give the benefit of the doubt. But this is not willful blindness. This is not ignorance. This is flat out knowingly misleading the American people about something and attempting to turn it into something that is not for so many Americans, which is political. I also resent the idea that we could turn it into politics. As we heard yesterday, Joe Scarborough took great issue with Donnie Deutsch. I was like, welcome to the party, Joe. Republican Party crane? No, not about R's or D's. I don't play that game, but you want to keep making it about that, go ahead. It's about accountability. Grow up. And here's the deal. When you think about what happened yesterday with Joe Scarborough, he also spoke up regarding an issue about Clarence Thomas being called an Uncle Tom. I'll get to that a little later. I want to stay on Benghazi. Putting on the political lens when we're talking about 4 dead Americans and the mainstream media, as well as the administration, first and foremost the administration, and then the mainstream media aiding and abetting a cover-up. And then trying to dismiss people as conspiracy theorists. Let me tell you something. I don't like conspiracies. I'm not a fan of them. Oftentimes I see people have these great theories and the links are tenuous at best, or there's something missing, or it can be explained. And once you explain one part, it's not explained in another. People can have those. There are some people who say, Crane, I like conspiracy theories and I don't like what you had to say. I get it. That's fine. I'm speaking as Crane Durham. I'm not a fan of conspiracy theories. Because of what I just mentioned. That said, and as well as it becomes a distraction, I want evidence to back things up. That's the goal. It's not really, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the administration and take the IRS and the emails in 2010 and the statements made by Lois Lerner and find out that there's not a smidgen of corruption. No, there's much more than a smidgen of corruption. There's a great deal of corruption, and that's the reason somebody's taking the fifth, which he really can't do in the sense of what the Washington, D.C. law is. See, I want things substantive. It's Ellie, don't write me if you're a conspiracy theorist and say, why don't you like it? It's just not my bag, baby. It's just not my thing. There are other people who are very good at that and wonderful and it'd be entertaining. That's great. It's just not me. Some people always say, well, why aren't no, play the game. But back to it. I want to present the evidence to find out what the truth is and to follow it and understand it. And it's really not that hard. These are not wild conspiracies. It's not a wild conspiracy when it comes to Fast and Furious and claim of executive privilege, because that speaks to why did they claim it? What was the qualification for it? And we did a show on that, and we did numerous interviews with Hans von Spakovsky because it really didn't line up. If you look at what it takes for executive privilege and what they've said, it doesn't really make sense. Also, the timeline of when they knew, what they knew, when they knew it. That's a problem. James Rosen, Cheryl Atkinson. These are not conspiracies. These are not reporters who are way out there. But both of those cases, we can look at what happened and some of the things that happened to them when they were investigating and or they were stopped by their management. In the case of Cheryl Atkinson, by the way, specifically. Obamacare. Obamacare's been a complete deception on the step, and we've done this before. We've played the clip over and over about the step to the single payer, which this is. And we've talked about that from day one. We've also looked at what the statements have been, what the reality is, and the disparity between the two, even those charting the lie of the year with President Obama. And then they wanted to say, oh yeah, he apologized for it. No, he really did not. He tried to change what he said and tried to run that as the story. What he meant, oh, here's what I really meant and what I said. He wasn't changing it. It's amazing. And that's how disgustingly corrupt the mainstream media is. But where it really hits home in the sense of corruption is when you have a 60 Minutes half information where he doesn't call it a terrorist attack. Romney makes that allegation during the debate. A month and 4 days later during the debate, September 12th, he wouldn't call it a terrorist attack, claims he would. Steve Cross says what Mitt Romney said during the debate. And then 60 Minutes releases it 3 days in a back channel before the election, but doesn't reference it that night. That could have been an exclusive. Here's what he said. To think that is a credible news organization, to me, is like, what? Really? And then people will just turn, because I've dealt with this conspiracy, because you think Obama's bad, and then maybe you don't like him because he's black, and I go, well, you're an idiot. I mean, that's an asinine statement. Pardon me, I don't like to use that word, but it is. Because it's never about, no, why did they do that? Why did they have that? Where was he during the night of the attack? That's the question. And you get passionate and angry because you say, don't we all want to know this? And then you realize, maybe not. Maybe some people just don't care. Maybe we're seeing what some people really think and feel about those that have paid the ultimate price and continue to be in harm's way. Certainly, why would you put people in Afghanistan if you didn't have a plan for victory, announce timelines, and give a quarter less troops than they requested in the minimum request? I don't know. General Keane asked that question through and through, but I digress. You see, I can go down multiple avenues because there is so much there. It's a fire hose of information coming out. So we want to segregate it out to make sure, hey, this is understandable, what is actually happening. It's a little difficult when what Nancy Pelosi just said, oh, projection and hello, Saul Alinsky, way to go, rules for radicals about what you project and what you put on your ideological foe. Subterfuge. Oh, it says obfuscation. No, Jake Tapper told a radio host that, yeah, this is obfuscation and everything else. See, there are people who can do their jobs. Jake Tapper is actually, I look at it as a pretty outstanding journalist, as well as Major Garrett. Now, do I criticize him sometimes? Yes, obviously. That's real easy to do. There are people capable. Jonathan Karl is capable of doing his job. We saw that. Ed Henry, capable, certainly, of doing his job. Bret Baier did his job and then some last night. And I believe Bret Baier is probably the best journalist out there right now. Because when the interview happens, he actually goes right to the meat of the issue. And he could do it with a conservative, he could do it with a liberal. Here. In the age of Brit Hume, I mean, it's pretty amazing. So it's not a question of ability. Or a great journalist like Arnold Allard. That guy's just amazing. Read one of his articles on any issue, you're prepped. You're done. Boom. Just like that. Okay, now let me get to Bret Baier last night, because here are the peaches of the interview, which I will post the full thing after the show. And it's cut number 4. Why don't we begin with Dude? Can we have that ready? Roll it.
Talking about. According to the emails and the timeline, the CIA circulates new talking points after they've removed a mention of Al-Qaeda. And then at 6:21, the White House, me, add a line about the administration warning of September 10th of social media reports calling for demonstrations. True?
I believe so.
Did you also change attacks to demonstrations in the talking points?
Maybe. I don't really remember.
You don't remember?
Dude, this was like 2 years ago. We're still talking about the most mundane
it is the thing
process
that everybody is talking about.
We're talking about the process of editing talking points. That's what bureaucrats do all day long. Your producers edit scripts multiple times.
Attacks to demonstrations.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
No. What is the question? Did I edit
the CIA
attacks?
Talking points, it was edited from attacks to demonstrations.
No, Michael Morell has testified about what he changed.
Yeah, Michael Morell also testified that the YouTube video had nothing to do with the CIA, and he gave 2 different, really, statements regarding what it was and why they went with a certain information and changing it and removing references to Al-Qaeda. That all said, during the whole interview, he doesn't show that type of arrogance. I don't know what you'd call it. Lack of concern, lack of respect for the issue. So I encourage you to listen to the whole interview and watch it. It's a fascinating interview. But here's another part of it. Where was President Obama during that time? Where was President Obama? That was the question. Buzz Jacobs. You talk about a guy who's dedicated to getting to the truth and not getting political about it. Buzz Jacobs, co-director of Benghazi 9/11. This is part of it. He was asking that question. James S. Robbins, where was the president? Writer for USA Today. Contributor and comes on this program. So could we get that clip ready? Is it ready? That's clip 4. I love my team. They always save me. Roll it.
The ground testified that they knew where the ambassador was, that they were very military in their precision.
I remember,
it was not guys that were coming to protest.
Brett,
they had mortars and heavy weapons.
Brett, a couple of things. One, I was in the Situation Room that night, okay, and we didn't know where the ambassador was definitively. In
fact, was the president in the Situation Room?
No, and the fact that your network at one time reported that he watched video feed of the attack as it was ongoing is part of what I think has been
let me get to the
pattern of
that.
inaccurate.
Where was the president?
In the White House. Let me finish my initial statement. Okay, the notion that we could, you know, divine motives from a drone feed, I think, is wrong. And I also think that this idea that the military had the capability to rescue those individuals but chose not to, I think is extremely unfair to the military. And Admiral Mullen said basically the opposite.
In the ARB report.
Yeah.
Where was the president?
In the White House.
He wasn't in the Situation Room.
At what point in the evening? I mean, he was constantly...
Any point in the evening.
You know, it's well known that when the attack was first briefed to him, it was in the Oval Office, and he was updated constantly. And during that briefing, he told Tom Donilon and his Joint Chiefs and his SecDef to begin moving all military assets into the region.
So then when Hillary Clinton talks to him by phone at 10 p.m., he's where?
I don't know. I don't have a tracking device on him in the residence.
But you were in the Situation Room, and he wasn't there.
House. Yes, I was in the White House.
And the president was not in the Situation Room?
Not in the room I was in.
Okay. And soon after the phone call that Hillary Clinton...
You don't have to be in a Situation Room to monitor and intel the situation. The PDD is in the Oval Office.
We've never heard where the president was.
We did get a picture of the president during the Bin Laden raid. I believe that's what the colonel referenced, not the night of Benghazi, but during the raid, because we have a picture of him having that meeting initially with Panetta, who was already scheduled, which the attack had begun. I'd like you to reference Tom Joscelin's piece, another great journalist. Tom Joscelin said they knew from the get-go, that it was a terrorist attack. Quite frankly, we can all forgive the fact that when we're attacked, and if you're moving heaven and earth to save people's lives, absolutely. And the blood on the hands of the people who are the terrorists affiliated with some form of Al-Qaeda connection to that group. We also had a political narrative out there. But I don't understand how they could keep advancing a false narrative unless they counted on this never to be followed up on. I think the colonel said something very, very interesting. Watergate, nobody died in Watergate. But you couldn't open a paper. You couldn't turn on the nightly news without being, look at what was the network's coverage of this. Same thing with the IRS. I think it concerns us all that the IRS could be used. If it was used solely toward liberal groups and organizations, I think we would be covering it just as much. I know I would. Targeting those specific groups that way. There's something very wrong. And the notion that you can dismiss people as conspiracy theorists, or the fact that, oh, you just hate, I mean, they're really counting on you being dumber than a box of rocks. And me, for that matter. And you think about that just for a moment. Think about the fact that they attempted to dismiss all of this, even when they're asked, and I don't have time to play the clip. I've got a number of things I wanted to play for you. I'll post some of them up on the Facebook page regarding the Valhalla Project, as well as some of the clips that we have for you this week, and we'll play next week because they will still be relevant. But they were counting on you to be so knee-jerk, as George Will said, have like a Tourette's syndrome when it comes to the issue of race or economic envy. I'll add that in, or conspiracy, vast right-wing conspiracy. It's just total baloney. And what's happening is they count on you to buy into that. I have a question for you that even think of buying in on that. With your comparisons to, oh, this happened, it's the same thing. No, it's not. Be contextually honest. But tell me where there's a policy that's working. Tell me where a policy is working. Tell me where a foreign policy is working with the Ukraine. What would I do? I'd give them the arms they requested. I'd be doing exercises a great deal of them, with our not only our NATO partners in the form of 1,500 troops. I'd be putting a lot more. And I know people disagree with that, but at least they'll have something to disagree with. I agree. The sanctions, yeah, that's great. Unity, I think that's wonderful. No. You're totally underestimating Putin. Totally underestimating him. I'm not a fan of Putin. I think he's a brutal killer. I tell the truth about Vladimir Putin, and I wouldn't talk about their legitimate interest in the Ukraine. Sorry, had to get off on that tangent because there's so much to cover. I just don't know where to begin. Actually, I do. It goes to leadership and what you're looking for. And if you don't have a problem with what's going on in America right now, give me a policy that you see that is being advanced by the administration and those on the left that is working. You want to talk about freedom? You talk about the parents willing to choose and be able to choose a school where their kids gets to go to school. You want to talk about protecting that freedom? You tell me why we see gun-free zones and the slaughter that we've seen there, and blaming guns, legal gun ownership, as opposed to the fact that the restrictions set up places where the criminal thrives because they don't think about the rule of law. More guns, less crime. John Lott, economist, among others, talents that he has documented this. It's not about race. It's about the truth. It's not about economic envy and inequality, pardon me. It's about the truth, what works, and freedom. If we identify that our rights come from God and government's supposed to protect those individual rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness outlined in our Declaration, codified in our Constitution, maybe, just maybe, we will get on track. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.